Hey, how's everyone doing today? Welcome along. Today I'm chatting with Chris Dixon, all the way from Edinburgh. Chris, you're very welcome. Do you want to share a bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me. It's a real pleasure. Yeah, I've been teaching for about 17 years or so through various formats and both in person and I've taught in schools doing the sort of Scottish qualification stuff for the high schools and things like that. Previous to that, I suppose I should go and introduce a little bit about my musical background. I grew up in California initially, and I studied music over there. And in high school, they have in the high schools in California, they have these fantastic infrastructure of music with jazz bands and all the choirs and things, all these Hollywood movies that you see, about the Pitch Perfect, all that kind of stuff. It's all real, really. So it does exist. But that's what I grew up in, and then studied for a couple of years over there at university level, and then moved over to Scotland, which is where my family are from, and continued my studies here. And then obviously went on to become a professional musician on the back of that. And I've done pretty much everything from, wedding gigs to studio session work and session gigs and all that kind of stuff. Nothing's off the table in that respect. But what I really found was that my what I really enjoy doing is teaching guitar to people. It's just incredibly rewarding, there's so many fantastic facilities that we now have to be able to do that. So which brings me to where I am now, which is really just mainly what I do is I teach online for my students, and that format is working really, really well at the moment. So, yeah, that's sort of about me.
Brilliant.
Is there anything else you can think of? I
I'm
probably
good for
missed a
now.
few
I'll
things.
I'll, I'll
Yeah,
keep the questions coming.
yeah,
So
sure.
no, thanks for joining us today. So yeah, we were just chatting off camera before I hit record about like the pandemic and how it changed
Yeah.
things, and like about Zoom and one-to-one lessons suddenly being a sort of a paradigm for people out there. And we're also talking about how things have changed, how like, and I noticed it here too in Ireland, and I've heard it from other teachers from around the world that years ago people would be coming in wanting to learn metal or wanting to learn whatever band, Pearl Jam, Metallica, and they go to us as teachers. And then it's slightly changed now. There's YouTube and people try and learn off it. But like, let's say you get a call from a player who's tried to learn off YouTube and now they suddenly decide to do private lessons. What is bringing them to private lessons in your own opinion?
Well, I think that if they've been working with YouTube and they make that decision that they need something more, it's pre predominantly because you don't get feedback from YouTube. YouTube is what it is. It's a video, and there are many, many great resources out there on YouTube. Justin Guitar comes to mind. Marty, I forget his name.
Schwartz.
Marty Swart. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
All these guys. They do it really, really well. It's fantastic. But what you don't get is you don't get that immediate feedback of potentially changing your picking or some minor detail that you're not going to notice in the video that's going to frustrate you because you're trying to play this thing that you're watching this guy on the video do and it's not working for whatever reason. So, what people tend to get is that immediate feedback where, I'm talking to them about, okay, do this, let me see how you're doing it. Okay, you need to change that. Suddenly it clicks into place. And I do have quite a lot of students that have come from that background, obviously, because now YouTube is a fantastic learning resource. And so people do start there. And, that's okay because you've got to start somewhere and, it's free. The quality of the stuff is actually very, very good. Most of it, some of it is dreadful, as we know, but that's the nature of YouTube, right? So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I think that what people are looking for is the feedback from someone to tell them what to change, what to do right, and also the other thing that you get from week to week with a lesson is I think you get encouragement. You have somebody there saying, you're doing great, you're really improving. One of the things that we struggle with as guitarists or musicians, I think, is that when you're practicing, you're always there practicing. So you have to be awake, conscious of what you're doing. So every time you play that lick, for the 100th time that day, or whatever it is you're practicing, you know exactly how much effort you have to put in to make that sound good. Whereas your teacher, even though they're aware of that, obviously practicing is paramount to improving and enjoying the guitar. But your teacher doesn't see all of that. They just see you for half an hour or an hour every week, or whatever your schedule is. And they go, wow, this sounds a lot better this week than it did last week. You as the student are probably thinking, well, I put in like 20,000 hours trying to practice this thing, so I don't know if it's better or not. I haven't got any more perspective on it. So to have that teacher's perspective to say, hey, that's improved. Or conversely, do you know what? You put in 20,000 hours on that and it's going the other way. So we need to look at exactly what you're doing because you're not doing something right. I think that's important. I think that's what people are looking for in, guitar lessons these days.
Yeah, yeah, totally, totally. It is amazing how quick it changed. Like I noticed like somebody would come to me and it's like almost last resort. I've tried 8 videos on this one thing and I still can't get it. And like
Mm-hmm.
the thing everybody can see is underneath those big channels, like fair enough. Let's say if you Google guitar lessons, probably the first thing on Google is a channel with 8 million views going your very first guitar lesson with the catchy title like learn guitar in 10 minutes. And
Yeah.
next thing you look at the comments underneath and it's just like some it works for some and some it doesn't. And then
Yeah.
it's what happens to the ones that it doesn't work for. They'll go to another video, maybe get a bit. And I think at the end of the day, technique, like if you can establish a rock solid technique and you have that coach, mentor, teacher role, like that guitar teachers provide by your side, and then YouTube's like a library then. It's like how
Mm-hmm.
did
Yeah.
you when you were learning Chris in the first place, like as I was talking with other teachers, the internet wasn't the way it was now, like, but did you use
Yeah.
any online resources as you were learning?
I'm really old, so no.
I won't ask your age.
Do you know? Well, I'm 50, so
Okay.
I'm getting on a bit, but I learned in the 80s, so which was an interesting time to learn because you basically there were two ways to do it. You either went to a guitar teacher, and they showed you what to play, or there was a couple of guitar magazines, Guitar Player and
Yeah.
Guitar for the Practicing Musician, which I used to use. And Guitar for the Practicing Musician had like songs transcribed in it every month. So, I'd kind of try and learn the songs from the tab. There wasn't, Ultimate Guitar and all that kind of stuff because
Mm.
the internet just didn't exist. Um, the other thing that I did a lot of, which I think has now almost disappeared in some respects, is I used to sit and I used to listen to the
Yeah.
song and try and figure it out on the guitar, and like rewind it, do it again, rewind it, do it again, and I still do that in my practice sessions. Not as much as I used to, but I like to learn music that way because music is an oral art form. It's something you listen to. So uh, to sit and learn something off a piece of paper or a screen is great because it facilitates the ease and the speed of doing that. But if you're in a jam session, you've got to hear, you got to listen to what's going on around you, and you have to be able to react to that and improvise to that. And you know, so um, that's what I used to do. I used to sort of sit and work out these. Well, I guess incredibly difficult passages for me at the time. It was probably simple stuff, but when you're 14 years old or whatever, and you've only been playing for a few years or whatever, and you don't have the technique, anything is challenging. So, it came down to doing a lot of that kind of stuff. These days, I use YouTube in almost every practice that I do. I still practice every day. I love practicing, and that's another thing that as a teacher you have to inspire in your student. You have to say, look, okay, yeah, doing gigs is fun, you know, all that kind of stuff, the whole rock star thing, yeah, that's all fun. And, you know, as I say, I'm 50 years old. I've kind of been and done some of that stuff, you know, played some great gigs, all that sort of thing. But if you don't love sitting down with a guitar in your bedroom or your little music practice room or wherever it is you play guitar, then, you know, you're gonna not enjoy being a guitarist because the, you know, 90% of your time is spent sitting just on your own, playing guitar, practicing, trying to get better, you know, and if you don't have a love for that, it's going to be challenging for you. So I still practice every day. I love practicing. It's just great to sort of, you know, I suppose eager to listen to myself play guitar, you
That's
know.
good. That's good. Nice. And what do you mostly practice? Is it new material or is it technique or a variation?
I have a mix of a bunch of stuff. Like as a guitar teacher, another thing that I looked into a lot is not just okay, guitar technique, all that kind of stuff. Obviously, you have to understand that stuff to quite a high level. But the other thing that I looked at was how do people learn? What is the best sort of way to practice stuff? And I looked at lots and lots and lots of musicians and educators and outside of the music industry as well in terms of just how people learn. So I studied a lot of that. And the honest answer is that for every single person it's completely different. But what I do and what works for me is I do little 5 minute chunks of practice. So I actually picked this up from a guitarist called Rusty Cooley, who's a kind of
Oh
internet
yeah.
shredder
Yeah,
guy.
yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I was looking at his stuff, and he said I don't practice for more than 5 minutes a day. And I was like, okay, that's an interesting statement. How does that work? And what he actually meant was he will take a certain technique, whatever that may be, and he'll just play it for 5 minutes. So he'll go, okay, today I'm going to practice, you know, my legato on major scales for 5 minutes, and he'll sit and he'll do that, and then he moves on to a different thing and does that for 5 minutes, and he builds up his practice time in 5 minute chunks. So I tried this a few years ago, and that works for me. So I tend to do about half an hour to an hour a day because, like everybody, you know, we're all busy. We're all trying to make a living and do, you know, do all that stuff. I have two children, so you know that got to factor
Nice.
that in as well. And so I try to get 30 minutes to an hour every day on terms of practice, and I build that up in 5 minute chunks. And um, I tend to stick with a certain routine for about a month, and then I'll change things up a little bit and then start sort of building things up again. But my main things that I almost always practice are songs. So I'll look at least two or three songs that I'm working on that I want to improve on. At the moment, I'm doing a lot of jazz stuff. I'm doing Summertime. I'm doing On Green Dolphin Street.
Oh yeah.
Um, I'm doing a Joe Pass thing, which is incredibly difficult, but you know,
Yeah.
it is what it is. So I'm doing that stuff. And then I also put in a little bit of things like I do a lot of chord practice actually. So what I do, I'll just show you real
Sure,
quick
yeah.
if I can.
Lovely. Yeah. I
So
noticed the card boxes on the sheet behind you.
oh, this
Or
is
those
this
card.
is this is Ted Green's Chord Chemistry. Have you ever seen that book?
Oh yeah, Ted Green. I'll link him below as well. Yeah, I taught Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas to one or two students before. They're written. I love the way they're written.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy stuff. I mean, this was a book that for any people that are interested, this one's very old. As you can see, it's got all my coffee stains on it and things. But Chord Chemistry by
Brilliant.
Ted Green. It's kind of the Bible of chords. You know, every guitarist in the world sort of acknowledges that as being the book. And he wrote it when he was like 23 or something, which is absolutely, you know, crazy. But it's actually quite a difficult book to work through. So I bought that book when I was like 17 because, you know, everyone's like, you got to have this book. So I'm sort of trying to read through all this high level, you know, chord construction, not really understanding it. I think my chord knowledge at that point was, um, you know, bar chords and a few major sevens, minor sevens, that kind of thing. Not too much. But the guy that's actually a lot better or works better for me is Don Latarsky.
Okay, cool.
So he has a bunch of books. I think you can get them on Amazon. They're
Nice.
just laid out better, I think. For example, this isn't the one, but in my cupboard here I have stacks of books. But he has one called I think it's arpeggio shapes or something. And what it does is it has the chord, and then the next box is the arpeggio that fits in the chord, and then the next box is the scale that fits around the
Oh, nice.
arpeggio and the chord. So they're all laid out, so you can go, okay, there's my chord, there's my arpeggio, there's my scale. It's great. So and he does that for all the things, for all the chord inversions, I should say. All the things. Who knows? What does that mean? But a quick look into what I do with my chord practice. I basically take a chord in any position, and I kind of I practice in a different key every day, and it's a really simple system I use. On a Monday, I practice in the key of A. On a Tuesday, it's B. You know, on Wednesday, it's C. Now, basically, without counting sharps and flats, you have seven. You have seven. Key centers: A, B, C, D, E, F, G. So it kind of works. One for every day. So you get to G on the Sunday, and then you're back to A on the Monday.
That's
So I can,
great.
so that keeps me sort of moving up and down the neck quite a lot. So I do that kind of thing. So what I'll do with my chords is I'll basically, what day are we today? It's Friday. So what are we on? We're on E, right? So
Yeah.
I'll take I'll take for example the E. Oops, that's F sharp. So if we're in E, I'll maybe start with just playing like the major chord in E. So oops, getting it wrong. So that what I'm thinking about here is I'm thinking about the cage system. So I'm
Mhm.
thinking about a C chord, basically, and a lot. I know a lot of like you know younger students or less advanced students might not recognize that as the C chord, but
Mm.
for us that know a little bit about it, that's your C shape right there. And then what I'll do is I'll literally go through all the other not inversions of it, but I'll look at all the other modifications you can do to this chord. So I'll think about what's the next tone I can add, the six, and then maybe I want to go for the major seven, and I'll work through the whole thing. Major nine, major or nine at 6 9. All that kind of stuff. So I'll sit and I'll do that. I'll just go, okay, C major, C6, C7, C major 7, C9, blah, blah, blah. I'll go through as many modifications of that particular major chord that I can. So that's what I do with my chord practice. And then,
Nice.
maybe the next day I'll think about like the A shape or the G shape or something. And I try and sort of build up my chord knowledge because at some point I learned all of this stuff, and I think most of us are the same, in that you spend a certain amount of time practicing something, and then you move on to something else because you only have, an hour a day, or if that, to practice. So you have to bump stuff out of your practice routine, and then what happens is you sort of forget it, or it gets rusty, or whatever. So, with my chords, I like to keep them kind of like, in the back of my mind, so I know they're kind of right there if I can play them if I want to. You
That's
know.
great. And with the chords then, so that's great. Like, and even I spotted one there, I was like, that's a nice sounding chord. I didn't know that was the name of it. So with using the chords then, how would you say, how do you make use of what you practice? Sometimes I've chatted with students and some things students struggle with, and I've struggled with as well, where like years ago I'd learned like the Guns N' Roses solo because I was jamming with
Yeah,
my mates. And
yeah.
now like when I learn a solo, sometimes at the back of my mind, I'm thinking of all the uses for it. And sometimes I prioritize by use. So for you practicing, what so we're saying there's chords and there's the 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Do you ever think of the uses where you're going to put the practice, or is it to boost your level as a guitarist in general?
It's a little bit of both. So, um, sometimes the technical practice is really just to, just keep that level sort of moving slowly upwards. And the thing with doing, for example, practicing chords and going, okay, do I know a C chord? Do I know a C7? 6 9? All the stuff that I just showed you a second ago. Part of that is because it's easy to measure. Okay, so if you play a scale and you learn a scale, it's a very easy measurement tool to go, okay, I can now play a scale and I can play it really fast. and actually I know another inversion of the scale, or I know that scale in a different key. You know, as a student and as a teacher, that's a very easy measurement to take. But you're quite right in that it's not necessarily a musical thing. So how do you then use that? So part of my technical practice is really just sort of trying to bump that level up, and then the other part of it is exactly what you were talking about, which is the usage of it. So the first thing that I usually practice every day is songs, whatever I'm working on, and I'll think about some of the inversions of the chords that I was also practicing and try to fit them in. So, you know, if I'm playing like a C major 7 chord in Green Dolphin Street, it's like, okay, that's a really cool chord. What happens if I maybe change that to that C major 9 chord that I just learned? How's that going to sound, you know? And if it sounds good, then I'll add that into playing the song. You know, if it sounds bad, then, you know, you don't. So and the same with arpeggio work and scales. So a couple of other things that I do in terms of technical practice are I do arpeggios almost every day, just working through different shapes. I also work on scales, not as much as I used to, but I mean, do you want me to show you some of that stuff at all? Is that
Yeah, it'd be nice. Yes, well, would
okay?
be lovely.
Cool.
Thank you.
So um, in terms of my like arpeggio stuff, let's take a major 7 arpeggio. Again, we'll go with key of E because it's Friday. So what I'll do is I'll think about the root note first of all, and I'm going to go with up here because we can do a lot of stuff. If you're down here, you're in the open position. That's a little bit more limiting. So let's go with that as my major 7 arpeggio. Okay, so I'll play through it that way, and then I'll think about that's using my pinky as my sort of starting point. So I'm building this arpeggio sort of, I guess, south of the root.
Mm.
Okay, then I play the same arpeggio using my second finger, and so now I'm building it from here, and that sort of area, I suppose, has shifted up the neck a little bit. And then I'll also use my first finger. And what I was doing when I was using my second finger, my pinky, was I was playing the root, and then the third was being played here on the 11th fret on the 5th string. Same with this shape. But then when you move to the first finger on here, you want to move your third onto the same string. Oops, got it wrong. So there we go. So there's your major 7 arpeggio, doing it that way. Then I'll think about, you know, let's do the same thing but using, you know, that E there, and then I'll move to the next string and do it there, and so on. So I'll try and work through all the strings from my root note, and then, you know, from the 3rd, 5, and then the 7, or whatever it is. That's very in depth though. I mean, if you're doing that kind of stuff, you're sort of in an advanced stage of your learning and all that kind of thing, you know. So it's not necessarily helpful for a beginner. If I was going to show a beginner a major arpeggio, I would probably just start with, okay, play that note. Oops, got my volume down. Play that note, play that note, and play that note. You know, just work on that for a little bit. Or, you know, if you want to take it to this, you know, just something really simple. I'm just playing second finger, first finger on the next string, and pinky. Just a nice simple shape, because you can move that around a lot. And, you know, maybe not for a total beginner, but, you know, somebody who's been playing a few months or whatever, they can kind of grasp that sort of stuff, and they can then, you can go, okay, play it here, play it there, play it there. And then they start to hear this music coming out using arpeggios with some simple forms, you know. In terms of scale practice, I obviously, you start off with just whatever your scale shape is. That particular one was using 3 notes per string, and I was practicing it with, that was economy picking. I'll talk about picking in a bit because that's super important. But what I tend to do in my own practice, what I would recommend to students actually, is start off just getting that scale down. And one of the things about 3 note per string scales, that I've never heard people talk about. And I'm not suggesting that I discovered this because it's kind of obvious, but then, music is obvious and isn't obvious at the same time. Until somebody explains it to you, it's like, oh yeah, I totally see that now. But when you're learning scales, there's basically three shapes that you need to learn. And the first one is shape one, which is using, say, 5th fret, 7th fret, and 9th fret. So you've got this kind of like stretched shape, right? So you're playing 5, 7, 9. I'm one of these players that likes to use my third finger
I
to
spotted
play.
that. That's interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
as opposed to, a lot of guys like to do that. And I kind of came from a classical background and started to learn my scales that way, and it's just more comfortable. One of the other guys I think that does it, and I'm not anywhere in this guy's league, is Paul Gilbert. He's the only other person I know that sort of plays with
I was
that sort
thinking
of
Paul
finger.
Gilbert when you did that. It brought back. I was like, oh yeah, I saw that before. It was what was it, Feel the Earth movie? He's a cover of that, and I
Yeah,
saw like just that stretch is it's amazing.
yeah, he's fantastic. He's fantastic. But if you learn that shape, and it doesn't matter, whether you use your second finger or your third finger, the shape is the same. You still got 2 frets between each note, right? And you basically go, okay, that's pattern 1. So then move it onto the next string and play pattern 1 again. And then I use what I call pattern 2, which is basically first finger, then second finger on the next fret, and then your pinky again. And you're going to do pattern 2 twice. And then you're going to move up a fret and you're going to use pattern 3. Now pattern 3 is going to use your third finger, which is why I call it pattern 3. So first finger, third finger, pinky. And if you take something like that, you can break down all the modes with that. And I've found that for my students has been a big thing. Let's learn what I call the scale finger patterns, pattern 1, 2, and 3. And then let's learn the Dorian mode. Okay, so let's go for the Dorian mode. I'll do it in B because that will keep it in the key of, the parent key, as it were. But you're going to start with pattern 3. And then you're going to move to pattern 1. Move up 2 frets and do pattern 2. And there you go. Dorian. And it breaks it down just nice and simple into 3 separate patterns that you can then just memorize, So that's one way to sort of, I suppose, work with, students who are trying to learn scales and things at that level. In
Brilliant.
terms of what I... Sorry, go ahead.
Can I ask you real quick, just while we're on the point of scales, do you have students who, like, let's say they've done the YouTube song thing, trying to learn solos, and do any students come to you asking specifically for scales, or do you kind of bake the scales into the purpose behind getting technique and things for learning solos?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a bit, it's all of that really. I mean, I get some students that come along and go, oh, I heard this scale, and for some reason, it's the diminished scale. Everyone loves the diminished scale, so it's all the sort of metal guys. They're like, hey, what's that sound? It's oh, that's diminished. You got to do diminished if you want to play, play that kind of thing, or harmonic minor. Because that's the other one that's just a little bit different, but you hear it especially in that neoclassical kind of thing. So they want to know that stuff quite a lot. But the other students, for example, if I'm taking a complete beginner, we'll work through some really basic songs, with some very basic chord inversions. So as a starting point, I would maybe teach a G if you want to get a song going, because I think that that's the most important thing. Oops, again, my volume's down, but just playing a G like that, one finger, you're playing the 2 open notes and your 3rd fret, So then you can move that into a D shape. Now, there's no real easy way to play a D chord. You just have to learn the D chord, and that's not a bad thing, The D is one of the most used chords of all time. And then, maybe going to like a C or something, or an A minor, whatever. That's kind of like the knocking on heaven's door chord progression. But just sort of introducing them to that, and then the basic C scale, just real simple, and the really basics of E and A minor pentatonic shapes. not even the full thing, just one octave usually, just to get them going. Because, and they go, oh, okay, well that's cool. And of course, the question that you get asked by people who are not necessarily interested in learning scales is why? Why should I learn a scale? And then you kind of go, well, okay, if you learn a scale, then it's this. Oh, okay, I know that. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's just a little pentatonic scale that I'm playing there. And they're like, okay, yeah. And whenever I'm playing stuff for my students, they'll go, oh, what's the melody for that song? And I'll be like, oh, it kind of goes like this. And I'll play through the melody for them. And they're like, how do you know how to do that? And I'll say, well, it's because I understand all my scales. I've studied my scales. And as soon as I start playing that melody, I'm thinking, oh, this is a C scale or whatever scale it happens to be. And right away, I have the map of where the notes are. And that makes it easy for me to play through that particular melody. So they kind of get that, but you have to introduce that really slowly, I think, and just get them going with some really easy scale shapes. I don't do too much arpeggio stuff, at the very beginning, because that's a different thing, I think.
Nice.
But yeah,
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. No, thanks for sharing about the scales, Chris. It's a very other, how do you say, misunderstood or underutilized things with solos, where somebody could learn Sweet Child of Mine and then
yeah,
go, and all of a sudden, if you take them away from that area of the fretboard, they haven't connected in that those notes are contained in a scale and they can move it around and kind of reuse it, kind of for improvisation and things.
yeah,
So we'll be wrapping up soon enough, but I just want to ask you about picking. You mentioned economy
yeah.
picking, and a big thing, I don't know, have you found that, like, in terms of somebody learning off YouTube, if they haven't, what's the saying, check themselves before they wreck themselves, like the fingering on the solos and the picking, there'll be a lot of all downs going on.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Or
or whole,
sometimes upstrokes, weirdly.
yeah, yeah. Oh my God. So how would you train somebody who comes to you? Let's say they come to you, they've learned off online, but their picking is like it. Let's just say it isn't optimized. What would you do with them?
Okay, well, there's three things that I would do. And one of them is I tell them a story about my own picking experiences.
Nice.
And when I had been learning for a long time, obviously from the 80s and so on, and when I got to university, um, I went into my first guitar lesson. I had sort of one-to-one guitar lessons, and my guitar teacher said, okay, play me something. So I played him something, and he went, play it again. Okay, play it again, play it again. I'm like, oh, yeah, okay, cool. Um, and then he went, okay, you played that 7 different ways. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? He said, well, okay, obviously all your fretting stuff was fine, but you picked it 7 different ways. I'm like, oh. He says, has anyone talked to you about like your picking? I'm like, well, no. And for whatever reason, all of my guitar teachers up to that point, and some of these guys went to like GIT in Los Angeles, so I was learning from these guys who are amazing players, but not one of them said, here's how you need to pick. So I kind of was left to my own devices, and I could play really, really fast at that point. So he was like, okay, here's what you got to do. And he laid out this picking plan for me. And I was literally back to going, okay, down. Did I do a downstroke? Yeah, I did. Okay, up. Okay, there was
Yeah.
that. Yeah, okay. And everything went from being super fast to suddenly my practicing on my scales was it just went really slow because I had to like look at everything I was doing and deciding on whether I was going to alternate pick, economy pick, all that kind of thing. The first thing that you need to do as a guitar player, whether you're a student or well, you are if you're learning guitar, but the first thing you need to do is you have to have a very good alternate picking technique. If you're strumming lots of stuff, the same thing applies. You have to be able to go down, up, down, up, down, up. But with picking, it's super important. Yes, there's sweep picking. Yes, there's economy picking. There's hybrid picking. There's even something now called swybrid picking, which is a combination of
Oh my
sweep
God.
picking. Yeah, I only discovered this like a few weeks ago. I got invited to a seminar, and there's this guy called Marshall Harrison, who's a YouTube sensation apparently, and I've now subscribed to his channel,
Yeah.
who it's basically invented swybrid picking, and it's incredible stuff, and it's fantastic. But before you do all that, you gotta be able to alternate pick. So how do you train someone to alternate pick? There's a couple of things you can do. First of all, one of the good ones I think is take your basic pentatonic scale and instead of just playing one note or one pick per note, do four. So go down, up, 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 and so on throughout the whole scale. And then do the same thing coming back down. That does a couple of things. It allows you to easily concentrate on your alternate picking because you don't have to worry too much about what this hand is doing. It also slows your scale down. So, you can apply it to any scale at all. If you're learning a brand new scale, then play four on every note because you're slowing that scale down. You're not kind of da 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 da, jamming through it as fast as you can. You're going, okay, it's this note. Now I'm going to play that note. Change strings, 7th fret, 5, 7, and so you're working out your scale, and you're also working on your alternate picking at the same time. And most of my students really like that. They're like, okay, that's kind of easy. Another one which is kind of obvious is just doing the old chromatic kind of that kind of thing. And in a very basic context, I don't even reverse that. So what I mean is I'll play like first finger, second, third, fourth, do that all the way up. Obviously this is way faster than you should actually practice it if you're just starting out. But I'm just trying to get through it fast. And then instead of going pinky, which you can do, that's a separate exercise. Just keep it the same for now, just keep it simple. Just 1, 2, 3, 4 and come back down. So that's doing a couple of things. It's not so much finger training for this hand, even though you're practicing using all 4 fingers. And of course, as guitar teachers, we all know about the students who are like, oh, I hate my pinky.
Yeah.
I don't want to use my pinky. It's like, well, okay, watch any guitar player on any medium, and they're using their pinky because you have to. It's important. So you're starting to train that pinky up, but you're not necessarily thinking about, doing the backwards stuff. So pinky, third, second, first, all that kind of thing. What you're also working on, obviously, is your alternate picking, but changing strings from one string to another, because that's the stumbling block.
Yeah, a lot of players go down on each new string when they begin.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm doing there because I'm keeping it strictly alternate. So I'm going down, up, and it's straight into a downstroke. If you have 3
the 3
string, yeah, so it comes down to odds and evens, right? So if you have 3 notes, if you go back to your scale, you have a choice. You can alternate pick, so you have to jump a string, do an upstroke, or you can economy pick it as you suggest, which actually is kind of simpler because you're just going down, up, down on every string. Down, up, down, down, up, down, down, up, down, down, up, down. And I encourage students to develop that as well because I think that's more efficient, But, at the end of the day, you still need to have a good alternate picking technique to be able to do both. There's this, for a while, there was this kind of thing with students who are like, yeah, I never practice, I'm cool. Because practicing gets in the way of like my musicality. It's like, you're 15, what musicality are you talking about? That's actually not a fair comment because one of the things is I found some old tapes of myself playing when I was 15 recently because in lockdown you were not going anywhere, so let's go in the attic and dig all the stuff out, right? So found some tapes of myself when I was 15, and obviously I'm a much better player now than I was 30 years ago or whatever. But when I listen to it, there's something there already. It's like, oh, okay, I can hear my style already when I was 15, 13, whatever. It's already there. I like the way I play and the way I think about approaching the guitar hasn't really changed. I just know more stuff and have more things available to create music with. All my chord voicings, all that kind of thing, all my scales, all the stuff I didn't know 30 years ago is now there. But the way that I kind of play all that stuff is kind of the same, the approach.
That's great.
It's really cool. But, where was I going with this? So, as a 15-year-old, there's this kind of like anti-practice sort of thing where it's like, well, the more stuff you know, the more stuff you can choose to use. If you don't know it, you can't choose to use it. So if you don't have good alternate picking, you're going to struggle anyway. But if you have good alternate picking and then you start to practice economy picking or sweep picking or swibrid picking, you
Hmm.
know, great. Your alternate picking is going to facilitate that, and then you have a choice. You have a choice of how you approach something. Um, we're running out of time. I mean, how are you for
Yeah.
time?
I'm okay for another five, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, okay. So just real quick, if you
Yeah.
take again something like this scale thing, something like that. Let's go with that, right? So 5 notes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, alternate pick it. Da, 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 da. Or maybe you want to economy pick it. That's fine too. Or maybe you want to legato it. So it's legatoing, downstroke, upstroke. Or maybe you want to like legato, pick that with my finger, hybrid picking. And then tapping without picking. So hammer on from nowhere. And the thing is, all of these approaches sound different. So that's the cool thing. It's not about whether or not you can do really good legato or whether you can do really good alternate picking. It's that if you know how to do all of that stuff, any single thing that you can play, you can change the sound. I remember seeing an interview with Al Di Meola. I don't know if you know that guy.
Oh man, I was at dinner music of the gods with the student yesterday. We were talking about his picking, and we slowed it. Sorry, I'll not to interrupt. We
Yeah, yeah,
slowed it
yeah,
down on YouTube to like half speed even, and how clean it was, and the
yeah,
speed it was at half speed. It was That's who I learned. My teacher taught me Aldi Meola, and
yeah, yeah,
that's how I got into alternate picking. So
yeah. I was very fortunate. Many years ago, about 15 years ago, I went to see him in Belgium, and my girlfriend at the time was in PR and somehow managed to wangle for us to be at dinner after the gig. And I'm sitting at the dinner table with Aldi Meola 2 feet in front of me, and for about 4 hours we just talked guitar. And like we walked out of there, and my girlfriend's like, "You okay?" I'm like, I just sat and had dinner with Aldi Meola. That's like major. So
wow! Oh
yeah, it
my
was
God!
so
Jeez,
cool.
when you think
Yeah,
of all the VIP packages out there nowadays to go out with
yeah, yeah,
guitarists,
yeah.
4 hours. Oh my God!
That,
And what was the biggest thing you learned in the 4 hours from, or the biggest impression or takeaway?
well, there's a couple of things. First of all, I asked him like, how do you get so fast and clean? Do you practice with a metronome? And he was kind of like, he was really really nice guy. He's like, no, I just do this. And I'm like, okay. And then he got kind of interrupted or something and spoke to someone else. And then we kind of got back to that. And what he was meaning was basically you need to know where beat one is. You need to have a pulse. And I personally recommend that people practice with a metronome because,
Same.
it's you're always going to vary, especially when you're struggling with something and you haven't quite got the technique together. Slow it all down. I use a metronome to actually slow myself down when I practice. So I'll practice around 80 or 70 beats a minute on stuff that I can play much faster because I'm slowing it down to just check everything is technically correct. Because if everything's technically correct, turn the metronome off and it's like taking the brakes off, boom,
Yeah.
you're flying, you know. Whereas most people think of a metronome as something, okay, you start slow and then you use it to build up speed. I'm kind of the opposite. I try and use it to slow things down. But Al Di Meola was talking about you need to know where beat one is because, if you're playing something like this, again, I haven't got my sound up there. Or let's go with like a reggae thing. That's a different sound if it's on beat one as opposed to beat two. So I don't know if I can demonstrate that effectively here, but it's kind of like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, as opposed to 1, 2, 3, 4. Or on the half beat, 1, 2, 3, putting it in between,
Yeah.
as it were. So he was talking about that. You got to know where the beat is and things. But there's a couple more things I just quickly wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
But with
Sure.
the Al Di Meola thing, he was saying about he was talking about legato, and he's like, oh, I don't do legato because it's cheating, right? And I don't agree with that. I don't agree. I mean, his alternate picking technique is just phenomenal, but if you play something alternate picked and then play the same thing legato, it sounds different. So you have a
Mm.
different, a little bit of a different thing going on, and you can choose how you want to approach that. Exactly what I was talking about with this lick right there, where you
Yeah.
can basically go, okay, do I alternate pick it? Do I economy pick it? Do I legato it? Do I hybrid pick it? All those options are available if you've spent the time learning that technique. Um, the other thing I quickly wanted to talk about was something that you alluded to earlier. It was about, talking about playing up the neck up here. This is more of an advanced concept, but something really cool to think about. If you think about how many notes there are in music, and there are basically 12 if you go from E to E. So on the piano, you have 12 notes. In saxophone, everything, it's just 12 notes. Basically E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A, so on, right? On the guitar, we have, or on the keyboard, sorry, you can play an octave in one hand.
Yeah.
So from C to C in one hand, and then you can copy and paste that up and down the piano. It's as simple as that. On the guitar, it's not so simple, but we have something kind of similar, which is really cool, which is that you have 4 fingers and you have 6 strings. So I've got 4 notes right there. If I move on to the next string, I have another 4 notes, and so on. In total, in one position, I have 24 notes available. So in theory, and in fact it's not in theory, I've actually checked it and everything, but every single note that you would ever need to play is in any 4-fret range that you choose to play on. So it doesn't matter if I'm up here or if I'm down here, I still have access to every single note that I need to ever play. You could almost say that in theory you could have like a 4-fret guitar that
Yeah.
could
Yeah.
play, every song. So, obviously all the inversions and things are different depending on where you are, but you can basically learn every scale, every chord, every arpeggio for every key anywhere if you think
That's
about
cool.
it in that respect. So, yeah,
That'd be a
I
good
think
challenge, the 4 fret solo challenge. Best
yeah,
solo.
absolutely. Yeah,
Four
well,
fret radius.
a lot of jazz guys do that because
Mm.
they'll play, for example, a minor 7 arpeggio, and then maybe if we're playing a 2-5-1, we got a D minor chord, and then you're going to move to your 7th chord, which would be what are we on? There's one, so yeah, G7. So you want to go for your 7th, and then you're going to go to your major 7, which would be C. Now my C root is here, or it's here, so I could, and really I'm playing
Nice.
all 3 of those arpeggios in one place. So yeah, there's so much to think
Brilliant, and
about
yeah,
when
geez,
you're
I
learning.
could listen to you with your exercise, and it's been great even for me here. I've learned a lot today, so thank you very much, and I'm
Oh,
pretty sure
cool. You're
everybody
welcome.
watching is going. You have a lovely way of like just communicating the scales and the arpeggios. It's really great, so thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
so
Cool.
what we'll do, so hopefully we'll get to chat again. A few other teachers I've talked with on this, we're going to meet again. So if you're up for another time, are you a Guthrie Govan fan as well?
Oh, massive.
I spotted the fresh wrap. I was,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah,
is
yeah,
that
yeah,
a
yeah.
Charvel?
Yeah, this is the Sharva. I actually just saw his new one that's just come out. It's
Oh,
the Made in Japan one, and
uh,
and I noticed you had the.
I have the antique modern when he's with Sur. I have this one. So I've
Yeah, I
played. It's
saw
not on
that in the
many videos,
background
but
earlier.
yeah,
That's so cool.
beauty, and
Yeah,
it
I'm
it
jealous.
has that.
Look at the wear on it too.
I
It's
know, I
awesome.
know. When I got it off the guy, he was quite nervous. I bought it off years ago, secondhand, and he before he opened the case, he said one thing. He said all the dents and all the scratches. That's the way it is. I did not do any of this.
Okay, yeah, it's cooler though. You
Yeah,
know,
it's
you want
beautiful.
to
It's
have a
beautiful.
guitar that's that's kind of beat up. It looks cool. So,
Yeah, no
yeah,
pressure to keep it tidy.
yeah, absolutely. But yeah, Guthrie Govan is phenomenal. He's just, I mean, there's loads of guys that are, incredible players. I mean, I listen to lots of different things. I listen to that stuff. Obviously, growing up in the '80s, learning guitar, there was a lot of glam metal. Steve
Mm,
Vai, Satriani, all these guys. It's an interesting one because I remember hearing Surfing with the Alien for the first time when it came out, and also
Wow.
Passion and Warfare, you know. And what's weird is like Steve Vai's new album came out last month, and I was listening to it, and the first song on it is incredible. But it's kind of like, do you know, if this had been the first song on Passion and Warfare, I would be dropping my pants. You know, it's like,
Yeah.
wow. But what's bizarre is that we're almost acclimatized to that stuff now. You know, 30 years later, these guys have been releasing album after
Mm.
album of incredible guitar music. And you put it on and you're kind of like, oh, yeah, cool. You know, the impact is gone, you know. So you need your guys like Tosin Abasi to, you know, to kind of like do these cool new things and all this kind of like swybrid picking, all the new stuff that's
Yeah,
coming
yeah.
out. You know, you need
It's
these guys to sort of blow your mind a bit, you know, and keep it fresh. But
yeah, I know it's amazing. I do remember that when I heard Surfing with the Alien. It was a guitar magazine. My dad had gone to California on a holiday, and he came back. And I was on it was 2001. So
right,
he came back with a magazine, and it was like, I think it was Guitar Player, top 100 guitarists.
yeah,
And I was only starting on acoustic, and I just got my teacher, and he's so great. And I basically would go into town here in Ireland, and I'd buy a CD. Like, I'd go by whoever looked the craziest. Like Eddie Van Halen's guitar was
yeah,
up like this, and he was doing this, and I was like,
yeah, yeah,
"What is that?" So yeah, I
yeah,
went through them, and it like they are like the legacy, amazing classic players. Like, and nowadays, there's probably thousands of people with that technical ability with videos from their bedroom,
yeah.
and they won't get to the playing arenas thing, some of them, that the guys did.
Yeah, well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because there's so much of that. There's so many amazing. I mean, Marshall Harrison is the guy that sort of is touting the swybrid picking. Check him out,
Yeah, I will
because
definitely. I'll link him below too.
yeah, I mean, as far as I can tell, all he's ever done is sort of made YouTube videos, you know.
Wow.
But you know that's fine. So it is what it is.
It,
But yeah, I'm definitely up for another chat, and you don't have to ask me twice to talk about guitar. You know, it's
Brilliant,
my
man. No, it's
favorite thing in
great.
the
It's
world.
great. So what I'll do here is I'll stop the recording in a sec for everybody watching. So I want to say thanks so much for coming today, Chris. And where can people find out more about you? I'll link it below, but do you want to share your website or anything like that?
Yeah, sure. So there's a couple of things that I do. I've got chrisdixonguitar.com, which I haven't updated in ages, but you know it's kind of a quick overview. There's also eastlothianguitarlessons.co.uk, which is my main sort of teaching thing. Both of those, no, actually, Chris Dixon Guitar doesn't have a YouTube channel. I do have East Lothian Guitar Lessons has a YouTube channel. Predominantly, the
Brilliant.
stuff on there is mainly for my students. I actually use that as a sort of extra resource. So I'll play something for my students and then send them their notes. And in the notes, there'll be a link to the video of me playing it. So that helps
Brilliant.
them a lot. You know, I need to update some of that stuff, but it's there. But the main one that I'm actually working on at the moment is rock guitar lessons for old guys.
Class.
So, yeah, because like my upbringing was really just 80s metal, all that kind of thing. And as I said, I'm 50 years old, and I thought there must be loads of guys my age sitting around with a guitar sitting in the corner, going, man, I really want to learn Bon Jovi or Motley Crue or White Snake or whatever it was that they used to listen to, Guns N' Roses
Yeah.
back in the day. So, I've developed that channel to sort of cater to that kind of thing. It's going okay. It's been going about a year, and I mean, I don't have a lot of subscribers at the moment, but the one it's about 80, I think.
Nice.
But it's building up. It's getting there, and the cool thing is that none of them are my mum. So,
That's great. That's always
so
good.
yeah. So it's my subscribers are people that are genuinely interested in that stuff. So hopefully that takes off a little bit and we go from there. But it's a lot of fun just developing that stuff and trying to do the videos and trying to make the videos better and all that kind of thing. You and I could probably have a whole another hour chat on how to do that, because
Oh
in
man.
fact I wanted to pick your brains about that stuff, but
100%.
some
We'll
other
chat
time.
after this. Yeah, we can chat another time. 100%. With other teachers, I've talked to others have their own YouTube channel, and I can link you to what they're doing as well. I've been on a few
Yeah,
channels and some
cool.
great. It's great to finally open up the like. I hadn't talked with any other guitar teachers about online before this series, so
Yeah.
it's just great. And there's been a mix. Some of these videos and conversations. One teacher, he's from the States and he built up a music academy to a couple of hundred students. So we basically talked the
Wow.
business of teaching. And another
Yeah.
teacher then it was YouTube and another about teaching and scales and chords. So it's been really great. So Chris,
Fantastic.
thanks so much for coming along. I'll stop recording here in a second, but do you want to hang on after that just for a minute?
Yeah,
Okay,
absolutely.
thanks so much to everybody. Thanks for watching, and I'm
My
going to link
pleasure.
this below for anybody who wants to check out any of the links we discussed in the lesson about Chris's lessons as well. Thanks.
Okay, thanks guys, and keep practicing.